and what do we learn from it? And creating an environment where people can say, I blew these things, and I should have fixed those things, or accounted for those things earlier on. So I think for me, it's the ego will kill you every time.
Welcome to Bold Breakthroughs. I'm bringing you today the insights of Ryan McGrath, leader of IT at Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory, a place guaranteed to make anyone happy, at least for a few minutes if you wander in there like I do. There's an analogy used to make human relations vivid in our minds, and it's that of the node and the network. Each of us can be compared to a laptop or a server or something that connects to a network. And when we connect and cooperate with others, like a new mode connecting to a new network, Robert Metcalf, an IT expert, once discovered that there's something that happens called the Metcalf's Law, which showed that the real value of each new node connected to the network is not just the value of a single node, not a single value, but an exponential increase in value as long as it is contributing and cooperating with the other nodes in the network. And so connecting with others can be an important, valuable experience for all of us. And so we bring you today Ryan McGrath, who has some great insights. Not only has Ryan achieved success in his career at Rocky Mountain Chocolate Factory and leading IT, but he's been part of the Navy, part of the special operations that does search and rescue. So he has tremendous leadership and has some interesting challenges that he's faced and overcome to become a success in his career. The insights of Ryan McGrath.
Welcome to Bold Breakthroughs that unstick work and life. I'm Mark Cook, New York Times bestselling innovator. Each week I offer keynotes that engage thousands, and teams embed me weekly to unstick tech pivots, sales prospects, and ops constraints. We roll up our sleeves in small groups to create breakthroughs on top priorities for each individual, in person or via Zoom. 9 global studies of over 2 million successes fueled my 4,000 wins at top brands. I've shared rapid innovation in over 50 cities worldwide. Teams create revenue breakthroughs and clients see new profits. Thank you for listening and inspiring your breakthrough today.
It's good to be with you again. I wanted to start out really early in your life. And I understand that early on, you discovered that you were not like everyone else in a couple of respects. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, growing up was hyperactive. They label it now ADHD. And at the time, what it translates to is just a broad ability to focus on anything and everything at the same time. And I think you end up a lot of kids with a lot of energy. When I was going to school, not as much was known about it. And so I think the path for ADHD kids was the same as the path for other kids. And that, it leads to friction for kids at that age who don't have the personal insight, the knowledge and experience to leverage their strengths. They don't know what their strengths are. They don't know what their weaknesses are. They don't know what makes life harder or what makes it easier, operating within the context of focusing on everything. And so that was where I grew up. I think I was fortunate to have 2 parents who were curious about ADHD and curious about how you parent a child like that. I was the first kid of 5, and myself and my youngest brother both have ADHD, and I think that their parenting styles, they learned a lot from parenting me, and so that style changed as they raised him. And so, yeah, growing up, that's what it was.
In your early life, as you were starting to be asked to do one thing, tell us how that felt and how you experienced it going through the initial effort.
Everything kind of turns out that way. Everything is a rock in your shoe, and everything has sort of equal priority in what we need to do. So as a young child, the worksheet your teacher puts in front of you has the same sort of focus priority that the bird outside does, and the kid 3 desks over who's muttering to himself, and the new shoes you have on your feet, and what I'm going to have for lunch, and what I had for breakfast, and what my family's doing this weekend. All of it all together has that same priority, and consequently, at least it has the same priority, at least as I understand it. Whereas most normal people, the rock in the shoe is sort of the thing in front of you, and you pay attention to that. And a lot of these other things fade to the background, and you prioritize them well. With ADHD, those people tend to not prioritize all of that stimuli, which isn't bad. The strengths tend to be these people can focus on a lot more things, and are capable of processing kind of simultaneous information. As a young kid, it was hard sometimes for teachers and adults to manage a kid like me with a lot of energy, because I was kind of interested in everything around me. And especially when you're supposed to be doing that worksheet, which doesn't hold a lot of intrinsic interest. No kid wants to do that to begin with. The bird outside, the kid behind me, everything going on was more interesting than that worksheet. So it wasn't often doing exactly what my teacher wanted me to be doing. And it could be, it was the same sort of thing. My parents had asked me to do a chore, but what is more interesting is, the litany of other things going on around it. So I think as a young kid, our family spent a lot of time learning about that, mostly by trial and error. So like I said, by the time my youngest brother was around, they absolutely made different choices, based on what parents and our family had learned about the process.
Yeah, I know that now we have some medications that helps people focus better and achieve what they're trying to achieve a little bit better. But it always takes the cooperation of the individual to work with the medications. There's still effort on your part to find the focus on the right things, the quote unquote right things, when they are just a piece of paper, or when they are a chore that's not that exciting and you can't even see it, when there's so much interesting stimuli in the world. So tell me a little bit about your part in trying to get to the things that the world needed you to focus on, or what your parents needed you to focus on. Before we talk about them, I'd love to talk about them in just a second. Tell me about what your part in that is when you know that there's something that you're supposed to be focused on.
I wasn't an ill-intentioned kid. It wasn't like I don't want to do whatever I'm being asked to do, and so I'm not going to do it. It was more like, in the moment, there's a bunch of other stuff going on that's way more interesting, and so it's hard to maintain that focus. And I think what it translates to, if you get in trouble for not doing something, you feel bad for doing it. I don't think there's enough understanding as to why, I couldn't get this done, or why this was so difficult to accomplish or understand. And I think, the biggest thing that they help kids with now is noticing when, my focus is drifting and why it's drifting, and they give them tools to work with that. But as I was a kid, it was more, I didn't quite understand what it was. And so, I feel some way about whatever happened, based on the reaction of others.
Tell us about their part in making this work.
I think the biggest thing overall was, they were open about what they knew, and we discussed what was going on. And I think they always tried different exercises to help, compensate for that focus. I think.
What does that mean, compensate for the focus? What do you mean by that?
I mean, just sort of mental, have I done these things? Do I have these things? I think that the thing that drove my mother the craziest was I never could keep track of like all the things that I took to school. I was always missing a mitten or a snow boot, or I'd left my homework or a book, or any number of things. I would forget things just because I was trying to take a stab at doing it the way other people did it. From my perspective, everybody else remembers their mittens. Why can't I? And so I need to remember them. Versus now, sort of what I've learned is take, for example, when I get out of the car, I check for my wallet, my phone, my keys, and where do I put them? They're always in the same place. And it's a dumb, it's not even dumb. It's a very simple checklist, but I always know where they are now because I need to keep track of that. And I know that hopping out of the car and just putting my keys in my pocket and relying on them being in the same place 10 hours later isn't going to work out for me. So I get out and I have a backpack that I carry everywhere, and the phone and the wallet and the keys go in specific places in the backpack, and they're there every time I want them. And I'll see if I deviate from that. If I'm in a hurry, I stick my keys in a pocket. I won't see them again for a while. It happened the other day. I pulled a coat out that I haven't worn in 6 months and found several items in the pocket that I had just written off. I'm like, oh, well, that's where those went. Awesome. So
do you have a literal list when you're getting out of the car that you have on a dash, or just those 3 things in your mind?
Things live in my head. Things like that every day. I mean, the checklist breed a habit. And I actually read an amazing book called The Checklist Manifesto. The interesting thing about them is you execute a checklist over time, it does become habit. The value of the checklist is our inclination to skip a step. If I think I know the checklist, I'll end up skipping a step. And so for more complicated things, I write them down. I think I roll around with anything like 15 to 20 small little notebooks related to important things. I've got one for everyday notes. If I'm cruising down the hall or in a meeting, I'll jot things down and I revisit that. There were important things that I needed to pay attention to, and so I kept them at the time. But then I've got specific items. We're going on a family trip. I usually start a notebook of all the things that I need to remember. Things I need to do, reservations I need to make, places we're staying, or events that are happening. The idea is, and I think the most valuable thing I learned as a kid was I don't have to remember everything. I don't have to be focused on everything. It's okay, and I have a tool to remember that stuff by. And I think that was the biggest thing. And I think that the biggest change my parents made with my youngest brother was taking more of a, hey, are you prepared for this thing? And do you have all your things? And as they handed him, as he got older and they handed him more responsibility for his life, it became, what do you have tomorrow? And have you made preparations for that? Yes. Do you have everything you need? Yes. Do you understand what you're doing? Yes or no? And if he didn't, they'd walk him through ahead of time. And, he does some of the same things. He's very intentional about what he does and is very comfortable with I forgot stuff. I think one of my favorite phrases from childhood is, people have the habit of asking, ADHD and ADD kids, why did you do that? And in the moment, whatever the event was, the kid did what they did because that was where the focus was, that's where the interest was. And early on, somebody in my family, and I don't know who it was, coined it because that was the thing to do at the time. And that's literally why it happened. It seemed like a good thing to do at the time. In hindsight, maybe not so awesome. Maybe it wasn't a great idea. And I had plenty of those events in my childhood. It was like, this was a bad idea. But at the time, it seemed like a good idea. And I've learned.
What is the most difficult one you can remember?
I think the one, I wouldn't say it got me off track, but the one that sticks out is like, oh, I got really, really lucky, is my brothers and I were using Coke bottles to make dry ice bombs. And we didn't get the ratio right, and we were burying them because we wanted, when they exploded, to make a crater. And we didn't get the ratio right in one, and so we set it up, and we buried it, and we ran away, and it didn't go off, and it didn't go off, and it didn't go off, and didn't go off. And so I had to, at the time, I was like, well, we'll just put more water in. We didn't put enough water in, and didn't get enough pressure, so we'll go put some more water in. So I dug it up, and I picked it up, and I think probably what happened is it had not had enough water, but as I started to take the cap off, it let the pressure inside start to escape, and then the whole thing blew up in my hands. And I'm I think remarkably fortunate that I didn't lose any digits or any hands out of the deal. I was head to toe. I was deaf for probably 30 minutes, head to toe covered in blood blisters from the impact. Thankfully, it was a plastic bottle and dry ice bits. And, it was one of the lessons in my life. I got really, really lucky with that. And probably learning out of that, I tend as an adult to try and check seems like the thing to do at the time. Like, this seems like a really good idea, but is it a really good idea? Which I still have plenty of this was a bad idea, but I try, and I'm more successful now with, this was a bad idea. Maybe I should take a different approach.
That's awesome. Yes, well, we've had experiences like that, but I'm not sure any of us learned that insight to really reflect on whether it's a good idea at the time. Hopefully we've learned it now.
I didn't learn it at the time. I think, to your point, to your point, it's this sort of, it stands out more than some of my other past mistakes as a memorable moment. And looking back on it, I'd say in the last 15 or 20 years that, is this really a good idea, has developed.
That's great. Let's switch. Tell me a little bit about how and why you ended up in the Navy and how you ended up in the particular assignment you did.
So by the time I was a senior, I was good academically. I could grind my way out, and if I was bored with something, I was really bored with it. And it's a pretty funny arc to look at my transcripts between my junior and senior year. My junior semester, my grades held steady. My spring semester, my junior year, my grades started to dip. The fall semester of my senior year, so right, spring semester of junior, grades were headed down. Fall semester, my senior year, my grades were not awesome at all. And I was done with school. I was done with checking those boxes, and wanted to do something else. The military held an attraction. I think as any young boy, the uniforms, the jobs, the travel, the adventure, all held an attraction. I started looking at that. Talked to my dad about it, and ultimately he helped me enlist in the Navy. I wanted to do something hard. was really the sort of the direction I had. I definitely didn't want to go to college. College seemed boring and more of high school, and that held no attraction to me. I wanted to do something challenging, something hard. And I had the grades, I had the scores on the ASVAB to join Naval Search and Rescue. And looking at it's interesting now in our internet age. You can go online, find a dozen videos about what those guys do now. But at the time, the literature was sparse. I think the Navy had the best recruiting video of it, and it just looked awesome. It boiled down to you get to fly in helicopters all day long, and you provide the search and rescue coverage for the fleet and for the pilots, and a host or a variety of other missions with the helicopter community, and just it seemed like a blast all the way around. And that, at the end of the day, did not seem to include any schooling, any academic work. Didn't seem like I had to sit in a classroom. So I was in. I was hooked.
And did it turn out that way?
No, not entirely. I mean, the search and rescue pipeline is an 18-month pipeline, and I would say it's balanced between the physical and the academic. There were plenty of academic courses we had to attend. There's a lot to know. That position, you're the enlisted component of usually a 4 or 5 person crew. And you have to know your flight platforms. You have to know your missions. You have to know what you're doing. And that requires a lot of study and a lot of academic work.
And so how did you approach that? Were you using lists a lot?
Number one, I was more interested in it. Number two, I think the Navy, I think the military in general they have a different approach. It's not pure academics. There's a lot of relevance to what's going on in the world, and almost anything we did had a hands-on component, which is to say the academic side I didn't totally enjoy. And studying, being studious was still difficult for me. I had to make myself pay attention, but number one, there's the incentive to do well. The more often than not in the military, if you perform well in a class, in a training evolution, you end up being more successful. You usually get your choice of orders or stations. And number two, there's always sort of the hands-on component of that. I think the thing the thing we use for an example, my flight platform, in order to be qualified to fly, you had to be able to complete a pre-flight. And the pre-flight takes half an hour. You have a checklist that goes with it, but you actually have to know about the things that are on the checklist. You have to know all the information about them, and to finish that pre-flight, you take a check with a senior instructor, and they do the pre-flight with you and ask the questions and test your knowledge. So the studying for that was always miserable in the academic sense, but then for any module we were studying, we could go down to the bird, put our hands on the bird, talk through it, walk through it, talk to already qualified people. And I think I was old enough then to sort of realize the import of putting my head down and grinding through the academic part and learning it well enough so that I could go and do more of the hands-on. And I've always been more of a hands-on learner. I think, the rise of what my sons call YouTube University has been hugely beneficial to me in, we spent the other weekend, we had to pull the throttle body on our Jeep apart, and to be able to pull up a video and watch it and say, okay, I understand that, and then wind that video back and go watch specific steps and then do it in the Jeep, and kind of understand what we were doing is really helpful. And so that was, again, in the military, I think is where I really learned that more than just spending time with the books, putting my hands in it and working with it is hugely helpful to me.
How did you pick that area of search and rescue rather than some other part of the Navy?
It was hard. Honestly, I had some sort of romantic version in my mind of what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be stuck on a ship. I was a good swimmer at the time, and I was on the swim team and played soccer, and there was just an appeal to it. I don't want to say that the video helped sell, but I wanted to do something really, really hard with some status attached to it. I didn't understand a ton about the EOD community, explosive ordnance disposal, and so I didn't honestly look at them. I looked at the SEAL teams, and I mean, quite honestly, was intimidated by the commitment and what you had to put into that community. I don't think I had the confidence in my sort of screw it up and try it again approach to life that I could manage their attrition rate in their school. But the search and rescue community seemed like it was right up my alley.
What did you face that was particularly difficult as you got up to speed and prepared yourself to be a contributing and valuable member of the search and rescue teams?
I think the school itself, the proposition they make is, we're going to put a group of people in the fleet. It doesn't matter time of day, weather conditions, none of that matters. We're coming to get you. And so the school to prepare those people it's hard. And I think I knew it was hard going in, but it wasn't. The thing they put on you is it's very hard to fail search and rescue school. But there's nothing there that is academically or physically all that tough. But what they really test is the mental component, how committed you are. And they will, their instructors are very good at finding the mental weakness and pushing on it. And they'll push you right to the edge, and they will force you to decide whether I'm going to continue or this is not for me and I want to quit. Very few people fail that class. There was a class ahead of me and a class behind me and my class. And I honestly can think of one person that actually failed an academic portion. And even that was because of choices and not because he didn't grasp the academics. But, for a school that has I don't know what their stats are now, but something like a 70% attrition rate, most of that is people who decide it's not for me and they leave the program. And so I think that was the most shocking piece to me. I wanted to do something hard, but I didn't really know until I got there what hard meant. And I think it really is, having several times when you have the option to leave whenever. Send me somewhere easier, somewhere less miserable, and to decide to keep doing what you're doing. I think that was the biggest sort of wake up in my life. And I mean, that's translated since then into really, when I don't want to do something, is it really that hard?
What are some of those bold encounters and the lessons they taught you from that experience? I
think back to, rescue swimmer school. We had an instructor there who was, he was just a savage. I mean, there's a lot of physical fitness, and he was the guy that would be out in front of us, ahead of us, smoking a cigarette, setting a pace that was murdering the rest of us. And in one of our evolutions in the pool, I moved the wrong way, ended up inhaling a bunch of water, and couldn't breathe. And he was the instructor in the pool with me. And so they dragged me out on the deck, and they get you stood up. And it was probably solid, 15 or 20 seconds. I couldn't breathe. And at the time, the evolution was like working with a hostile person in the water. They don't want you to take them out of the water. And so you've got to gain control and get them out. So all of this is going on. They haul me out. And I get the water cleared and stop hacking and choking and get stood up. And the option is, and he looked at me and he's like, so you're going to finish this or are you done? And I remember at the time, wanted to be done with every fiber of my being. I mean, that was enough for today. Thank you very much. But the only way out was to quit. I mean, you don't finish the evolution, you don't finish the school. And I was not terribly confident in my performance that day. After that, I'd already tried to drown myself once, and the people playing victims in the pool were not going to give you a pass. They were not going to go lightly on you. So climbing back into that environment was a challenge. To sort of, I was 18 at the time. And they, grew up in a good home and always fed and didn't have to, I don't think I had to develop a ton of grit as a young child, to sort of like reach down and say, well, yeah, I'm going to jump right back into that fray, was something I didn't want to do. But he's like, I don't care. Get off my pool deck. Either quit or get back in the water, but you're not staying here. And so that was always stuck with me. I remember getting to the fleet, and as a new guy, you talk about being a contributor to a network. Once you get to the fleet in your squadron, you're a part of, a shop of people. We had about 30 guys in our shop, and the supervisors start handing out the jobs. These are things that we need to get done. And I remember sort of completing something, going back to him, and completing something, going back to him. He finally set me down. He's like, look, I don't need a task by task, event by event update. He's like, I expect you to do your job. I trust you to do your job. When I want to hear from you is when it's dawn. And here's when we need it done by. So come see me before that. But otherwise, not get lost, but kind of get lost and go sort the rest out. And that one is always sort of, it's stuck with me. I think it's matured.
So Ryan, did you have an experience that is super memorable from this time in your life?
Our crews in the helicopters train to work together, and everybody has the same input. And every once in a while, when those things click, you have a good time. And we were doing some desert low-level flight training. And if you spend any time in the desert, you know that it's not flat. It's very, very geographic terrain. There's canyons, there's hills, there's, valleys. And I remember one flight, we were training low-level flight training. So you're flying, less than 100 feet off the ground, following the contour of the ground. And everybody was, had their job going. Communication was going well. And we were just blazing along in the middle of a summer day, very close to the ground, sort of roller coaster ride. And just the sheer fun of getting to do that was really awesome. And everybody had a great time. It was just a great flight. And I think that's the strength of the network when it's working well. It's very seamless. It's very easy. It's very low friction.
Let me ask you something about that experience, if I could. In my research, I've found that one of the most predictive factors on a team to produce exceptional results is camaraderie, not just, hey, I like him or I like her or we like each other, but a deep sense of esprit de corps. Like, I have your back. We have history now together, even though it's been a brief few months. We've been through things. And when some teams achieve that, they outperform the teams that just show up to work and like each other. What are your thoughts on that?
I think if you can achieve that connection, that energy with a team, they will outperform teams that are, groups of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you asked that, because the second most memorable event was exactly kind of the opposite of the positive, but I think it demonstrates the strength of the network, so to speak. It was a night exercise, multiple helicopters from our teams, and we lost one of the helicopters. They crashed. And it happened, we were the trail, they were the lead. They crashed in front of us late at night, and our team didn't miss a beat. And we ended up flying several more hours in support of this crash. Not, despite the fact that other team members were on that bird in a lot of varied states, and we, our communication didn't break down. We as individuals did not, we didn't devolve into, what do you want to call it, a group of different people. We continued to function as a team, despite the stress, despite the emotion, despite, everything that was kind of developing against us. We continue to operate fluidly. And so I think it is, I think it comes back to the strength of the relationship. You pull the ego out. I don't have to be right. I don't have to be the one getting the recognition. I don't need to be the hero. I mean, everybody likes to be the hero of their own story, but when you start talking about teams, it's about the job that we're getting done, and everybody is valued for what they can contribute. And so as a leader, you have to reach down and in the meeting recognize who hasn't said anything, who hasn't brought any input. What are you thinking about? Like, what do you think about this? It doesn't matter if you don't know much. Like, provide your thoughts. Several times we've had somebody be like, "Oh, I don't know how this works, but I don't know why we're doing it this way. It seems easier if we just did this." And everybody just kind of goes, "Of course. Why wouldn't we?" So I think you're exactly right. You need to develop that connection. And it's like we talked with the cloud. If the team doesn't have the connection within that small network between the nodes, right? Information doesn't move, progress doesn't get made, work doesn't get done. But if you have that connection, that relationship, and it isn't necessarily we're best buddies and hang out all the time. It is, I know if I go out the door, you're going to take care of me. You're going to make decisions for my benefit and for the benefit of what we're doing. And I'm going to do the same thing. And we've practiced and worked together long enough that we don't need to discuss some of those decisions. They're on one of my checklists already.
There are moments when a teammate will actually sacrifice their career opportunity, their reputation within the company, whatever it may be, for another teammate in a business setting. And instead of taking years to gain trust and the traditional ways of getting close and getting that bond where you have each other's back, it's immediate. Like, as soon as a teammate says, I had this opportunity, I could have taken it, but I see it as yours and I want to help you succeed there. And you witness that and experience it yourself, you immediately create that bond and that trust. And it doesn't take years, months, or a lot of roller coasters and movie events. So it's a really great analogy coming from the space that you grew up in to prepare to be a leader.
As I've started to lead my own teams into the, not only is it, I trust you to do the job and I don't need a blow by blow. But I also trust you to do the job. I trust your judgment, and I don't need to have an opinion on the path we take. We're going to start at point A, and we need to get to point B. And I, as an ADHD kid, have spent enough time going, from point A up here and down over here, and then back over here, and then over here, and eventually getting to point B. That I think the thing I brought with me is some people go A to B and they're done and whack, and some people are all over the board. And as long as we get to B in the time frame we're shooting for, I don't need to have an opinion on that.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about what your leadership philosophies, other than that you're bringing from the military. The rest of us that haven't been in it, look to you, military leaders, as people that we should listen to, at least for part of our leadership style. What do you think the most valuable things, besides what you just mentioned, are to creating performance out of people, human beings?
I think people, from at least the way I see myself, and again, this is sort of like, the day after I got out of the military, this is probably a brand new bottle of wine, and over 20 years it's aged. So I think that the things, being a leader entails, number one, and I usually tell my team this, I don't need to have a lot of opinions about what we're doing day to day. I like to stay in touch with what's going on, because what I need to hear about are the challenges and the roadblocks. My function is to clear those things out of the way so that they can be productive. I think it's very important. I think one of the big things that a lot of people misconstrue about the military is that everybody there is sort of a do as I'm told group. And in general, the group is highly creative and very, they're full of a lot of ideas. And I think you'll find military leaders across the whole cross section, but in general, they encourage, debate and discourse, and not for the sake of disagreement, but for the sake of distilling something down to the best idea possible. And a lot of times operating as a rescue crew, everybody had equal say and everybody had equal ideas. And there was a heavy emphasis on not closing down that communication. But that was also always backed with there was a single point of leadership, and that person could make a decision and had all the responsibility. And that comes to my teams today. Like, I want to talk through this. I want to hear everybody's ideas. And because I'm not concerned with, the details between A and B, I don't have to have an opinion on those. They're free to move. But part of that freedom is the fact that it's my responsibility. If they screw up, I want to hear about it. I want to talk about it. We want to document the lessons that come out of it so we can change things and better prepare for things. But it was my responsibility. Obviously, if there was a mistake, it's because when I set that person on the path, they didn't have the tools, the skills, the education, the training that they needed to make the quote unquote right decision. But that's not something they should be punished or disciplined for. And I think you find that a lot in the military. People are held accountable for their mistakes, but the military is fantastic at taking an evolution, breaking it down, talking about it, learning the good things and the bad, and adjusting from there. I never had an experience where I was, reprimanded, disciplined, punished. I was never punished, reprimanded for a mistake, unless it was something, negligent. This was something I knew I needed to do and I didn't do it. I can't think of an event that was like that. So I think it's the most important thing. I think that the team, the people, they bring their strengths, and as a leader, you need to look for that and let people operate in them. I think you can challenge the weakness, but when you put somebody in a position where you're relying on them to exercise their weakness to get the job done, I think you as a leader are setting people up for failure. And so recognizing those situations
Do
and
you think there's a place where there's a task or a job that has less consequence, that you recognize the match between someone's weakness and someone's opportunity to tackle something, that you do place people in those?
I don't think it's that, but I generally I look at maybe categorizing weaknesses a little bit differently. I think people have weaknesses in skills, knowledge, and experience. And as a leader, if you run up against one of those things in their career path, I think you absolutely give them events and opportunities where they're underprepared for what they're taking on, to experience that and to work in that and to really see what's required, to be successful, and to let them, give them the opportunity to rise and to grind against that. And I think, if you're a good leader, you also backstop them. I gave one of our people a project recently they know nothing about, and I spend more time on the front end, and I've learned now, talk me through your plan. Talk me through, what's your next decision point? Do you know what you need from that? Or do we need to discuss that? Can I share my experiences in this? And you can take what you want to. And sometimes, the problem you're discussing is very low impact. And sometimes the problem you're discussing has huge consequences. And so getting to a place as a leader, getting to a place as a contributing node of a network where I think I'm the central hub and everything needs to go through me and I've got all the answers, that's a really bad place to be, because you start shutting down the people who have the great ideas.
How often do you and how do you encourage a team like that one specific team, their support team, to dig deeper?
At the end of the day, if you don't have a relationship with that person or people or the team that you're working with, you don't have some social credibility with them, I think it's tough to really drill down to, what's really going on. Why are we seeing this? What's happening? And so my team, they're the support team, a lot of times if they see the same event over and over and over, the question again, ADHD kid, don't ask me why I did it. It seemed like the thing to do at the time. And that's the best information I can give you. My team doesn't spend time, why did you do this? They generally go back and say, hey, we see this process and it seems to be generating this difficulty. Is there a way we can make it better for you? How can we make your life easier? And then they get into a conversation with people that is really non-technical. And they spend a lot of time with, sort of, if I gave you a magic wand and this process was better, what would it look like to you? Just tell me in your words. And then we spend time talking about, is there a place we can impact that? Can we give you a better report? Can we give you better automation? Can the computers do something on their own to improve this overall structure?
So, Ryan, a minute ago, I talked about Metcalfe's law. Connect a new node to the network, gain exponential value. And I likened it to a human connecting to a new human network. But I want to go back to the technical version again. We have all of these companies that are providing a connection to the cloud and really taking over part of our network. Are we losing all our value to them and they're gaining all the value as we attach those to the network? What are your thoughts about that?
With the advent of the superior connection of the iPhone, and it's really, the iPhone has become business impactful in probably the last 5 years. My teams are always connected. I have an improved connection to my resources, and So there have been on occasion, I've said to my team, hey, stay near your phone. I even look better, our manufacturing facility, when they start running more shifts to compensate, for increased demand, there are times when they need access to IT resources. But it doesn't make a ton of sense business-wise to have IT resources in the building. They're here, they're manufacturing, but they're really not using much technology. So as long as they can connect to one of those resources on a as-needed basis, they're doing great. And so I think, as your connection improves, the relationship improves, the relationship becomes more valuable to you. I have now, in the last 3 or 4 years, developed relationships with other software as a service and service as a service providers who are not in rural Colorado, but because we're able to connect more effectively, they have value for me, and is my putting my reliance on their skill set rather than having that skill set here where I can touch it, a risk for sure. But at the same time, because of video conferencing, because of the internet, because of everything else, it's not that hard to do. And in fact, if COVID did anything, COVID forced all of us to rely more on the cloud. We had to strengthen our connections outside of like our immediate node, the stuff directly connected to us. I mean, Rocky Mountain moved roughly half our admin staff off-site in 3 weeks. And in that 3 weeks, my team had to figure out how to make those connections strong, how to make sure that people could connect on a host of issues at a moment's notice. And so I don't think the cloud is bad. I think whether you're talking about technology or you're talking about, your personal cloud, I think the piece that matters is the relationship, the connection. If you have a crappy relationship or a crappy connection, that cloud holds no value for you. You can't get what you need from it. If you have a strong connection, a strong relationship, then I think the cloud provides immense value.
Well, it's interesting. The other thing you're pointing out is that we as nodes have to come better prepared. It's pointing out an analogy also with human beings in that the technology situation is that my phone needs to have better cameras, my connection to services and the things I subscribe to out of my home need to be better, and my offices and car, the providers I choose need to be the best I can get, and my ability to communicate in this is a very uncomfortable way to communicate 5 years ago, and now we're all able to do it. It's very awkward and boring and tedious to talk to nobody, essentially, to a camera. And our minds have extended beyond what we see in front of us to know that you really are in Colorado talking to me at least a state away. So it's bringing your best as a node is the other side of that, not just the relationship so it's not just the infrastructure, it's the relationship, it's the quality of contribution by the node that makes things more valuable. Is that close?
Yeah, I think so. And I think the thing to understand about any network is that any individual node, it brings value both in connecting to the network and being a part of the network. But any given node, if you forgive a little anthropomorphization, any node that thinks too highly of itself, is too loud, can drown out its connections to the other nodes and to what makes the network. It's a common attack tactic in technology. If I take a series of computers and have them blast out valueless information louder than other computers, I can shut down a network. And I think it's true with people. If you have one or two people on the team that won't listen and are more worried about being heard than hearing and understanding, in building that relationship, they'll shut down everybody else.
Ryan, could you talk me through your leadership philosophy and how to lead IT teams specifically. It also might translate to other types of teams, how you would approach your leadership there.
As a leader, you have to be fairly egoless. This is not about me. It's about the job we're trying to get done. I just happen to be the person incented and responsible for making sure the job gets done. Past that, should put the best people to get the job done in the right spots, and then make sure that stuff is not in their way.
Do you have an example of that?
One of the servers that holds some critical functionality for the company, we had an outage. And I had, at the time, the team leader dealing with the problem, had looked at the problem, had provided, given me diagnosis. I know what the problem is, and I'm working on it, and I'm exploring it with these people. And at the time, I think they had some leeway in terms of time, how long they've been working on the problem. And I knew where we needed to go. I knew we had enough time to let them take a crack at that without my input. And so I let them have that time. When our time became more of a factor, the outage was starting to impact business in a way that was negative. My concern at that point was we'd use one resource, which was time, and we needed to accomplish the job. But at the same time, I had to sort of keep in mind that the value of the situation was in part curing the server problem, but in part this team leader coming out the other side, having learned and having grown, and not just me grabbing it away from them and sidelining them because I was pretty sure I could get the problem solved quicker. And so when it became, when we were out of our luxury, our resource of time, then my next step was, okay, we're on the clock now. We've spent several days figuring this out. This is the progress we have. Here's the things that we need to achieve. And started, rather than saying, the server needs to be up, saying the server needs to be up by this day. And talk me through a plan, talk me through the steps that make that happen. And, they went away, they came back with a plan, and they're like, these are the things that need to happen. I know how to do these 3 things. I don't know how to do these 2 things. And, for me as a leader, I have the option to berate them, to grind on them for not knowing how to do something. Or, I can take the opportunity to say, here's the resources, here's what we need to accomplish those things. What else do you need? And so continue to let them learn, continue to let them grow, all at the same time, my boss is asking us, why is this happening? And taking that responsibility and not getting wrapped up in the fact that my boss is not happy with me because we're having an outage. And I could take my ego and say, I can fix this. I can stop getting yelled at by my boss. I can fix my problem. But in the process, we'll compromise a team member. Or I can tell them, like, look, same timeline, same net result. I understand what you're saying. We're going to get there. We've got to work through these things and let the team person grow, keeping them out of sort of the pressure from above. And then after it, thing is cured. We sit down and the whole team, we sat around and said, okay, what went wrong? What led up to the problem? What went wrong in the problem, and what went right, and what do we learn from it? And creating an environment where people can say, I blew these things, and I should have fixed those things, or accounted for those things earlier on. So I think it's, for me, it's the ego will kill you every time. It even makes bad decisions for you, even within the realm of seems like the thing to do at the time. And so if you can pull that out and make sure people learn that. You can model it from, and make sure that people can learn and grow in a healthy environment. Then I think more than anything that helps.
Finally, I just want to ask you a couple of questions. If you were to give advice to someone who was young, who was facing an obstacle or a challenge like you did, what advice would you give them to give them hope to get around that?
I think in some part it's the strength of the relationship. If they're trying to overcome something, they should have a mentor. Find a mentor. Find an influencer. Find somebody who can provide value. I think all too often, especially younger people, they give each other terrible advice because nobody knows, but they are so focused on proving themselves or just proving themselves that they miss the value of an older person. And I think it cuts both ways, because this is even true for any young person starting a career. Like, I'm so desperate to be relevant and successful and to cut my teeth that I miss the value of saying, I don't know how to do this. Could you give me a little advice? And I think that older people, more experienced people, the veterans, if you will, often miss the value of, listening and just providing, hey, do you want to talk me through that? I don't have any opinion here. I don't need to make any decisions. Just, bounce this off me. The number of times I've seen somebody like, here's my problem, and this is what I normally do to solve it, and then they go, oh, I see it. Okay, gotcha. Like, I don't need you to tell me how to do it. Just, provide your lens for a minute.
What do you think you would say are the most important elements of someone making a breakthrough at work?
I think number one, look internally. Make sure your ego is not in the way. I'd say 9 times out of 10, at least some portion of the problem is I'm trying to avoid something. I'm trying to avoid looking incapable. I'm trying to avoid looking for help. I'm trying to avoid saying, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And so number one, it's probably, if you put that ego on a shelf and take a step back, you'll probably be more successful. You probably have a clearer path. I think number two, there's value in going and seeking out your resources. Recently, I had something going on, and I just could not sort it out. And there happens to be a very smart person in another department. And I went to them and I said, I don't know enough about this to even ask the right questions. If you would be so gracious as to sit down with me and just share what you know, I'd really appreciate it. And they were so excited. I mean, in the connecting nodes on a network, like, we don't really have cause to have a very strong connection. But just asking them to share what they know on a topic that I know very little, strengthen the connection that, overall makes the network, which is, if we're looking at Rocky Mountain as a network, it makes the network overall stronger. So I think those are probably the things you start with.
I appreciate so much your valuable insights, the lessons that you've painted about deciding, is this the right thing in this moment? Really? Setting your ego aside, not just at the door, but everywhere. And then also just getting close to each other in this network and broadening the network. Really appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed it, please share this episode with a friend that needs a breakthrough. Post this on social media and add my website, or tag my YouTube page, or just text markspencercook.com to a friend, or message that link on Instagram right now. Also, make sure to subscribe on my site at markspencercook.com to stay up to date on all the latest advice on how to unstick priorities to create breakthroughs. I'm so grateful that you listened today. And remember, you have people rooting for you. They love you and want you to make your breakthrough. That includes us too. Take the first step. Now, you know what time it is. It's time to go create a breakthrough for your work in life. And we'll see you there.